GOT 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hodder Show.
What is up, everybody? We are on audio here today on episode 304 of The Hodder Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. I have a really fun episode for you here today, as I try to every single week right here on The Hodder Show. I'm sitting down with my new buddy, Mathew Tyler Di Leo from WCS, or Worst Case Scenario, as you may know them as, but they are WCS, the abbreviation version of that name. And we have a really, really fun chat diving into WCS's brand new single, which you guys are also going to hear at the end of the episode, Melancholy, and kind of where that song came from. Talk a little bit about the background of the band. We talk a little bit about Matthew's background in music, how he got started, influences. And then we just kind of talk a lot about the music industry and playing different shows and his experiences. He's been in the industry here for about 10 years now. So he has a lot of really, really great fun stories. And he has what I think is the best, worst first show story I have ever heard. And that is a statement, because I've heard a lot of really bad first show stories here on the show. And I think Matthews might take the cake. So we're going to have a lot of fun here today. Thank you guys so very much for checking this out. Be sure to look down below in the description of this video for links to WCS and also Matthew's YouTube channel. I'm trying to remember to make sure I put that down below. But without further ado, we are going to jump in. This is my chat with Mathew Tyler Di Leo from WCS here on The Hodder Show. Let's get into it. All right, guys, very excited about this today. We have, from Worst Case Scenario, Mathew Tyler Di Leo. Did I pronounce your name correctly? I just butchered it, didn't I?
You somewhat landed it.
Yay!
I'll give you a 0.5 for sticking the landing.
Got the end part right.
Yeah.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Nothing much. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. I've been watching some episodes in preparation, and I'm just like, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. I was a little bit worried because this past weekend we were supposed to do it, and like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong.
Of course, like, yeah, your internet got knocked out, and I was, of course, even today I was having some issues, and I'm just like, yeah, that just seems to be how it goes, though, right?
Well, we're going to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's rock and roll, right? So first things first, obviously, we got lots to talk about. Obviously, I want to talk about your influences and what got you into music and things of that nature. But the whole reason why we got linked up for you to come on the show is because you guys just released a single. I guess it was 2 months ago now on July 1st, which was Melancholy, which is an awesome song. So I wanted to dive into that real quick. Walk me through Melancholy and kind of what the song's about and the writing process.
So Melancholy was a really, really interesting song in a sense that it's because I'm used to the typical 4/4 beats per minute style. And this is written in 7/4, which is just like, why are you guys writing things that are difficult for me? But we were sitting down, and he was playing this music that had this very dreamlike texture, Paul J. Doran, our guitarist. And I was sitting there and I'm like, I feel like I'm in a dreamscape. And as we recorded the entire thing, I'm sitting in my car and I'm driving, and I kept remembering what it was like working at the Amazon warehouse, how it kind of just felt like the world that I was going in was passing me by. And then the pandemic started, and I was hearing news reports about people that were working like front end jobs like cashier in food and stuff like that, and how they don't have the ability to work from home. Their life, quite honestly, is I either go to work and possibly get the virus and die, or I stay at home and then get thrown out on the street because I can't pay my bills anymore.
Yeah.
And so I was just looking at it from that perspective. And while I was on EI, I was just sort of writing as I was in my commute, and I would like sit there and I'd be like, okay, here's the melody, here's the lyrics that go on. And so I sort of captured that sort of dream, like, I don't know if this world that I'm living in is real, but it's like, it's either I'm screwed or I'm screwed. So I might as well just be screwed.
Exactly. And that's what's so funny. Like for me, as someone has been working the entire time, which in one regard I'm very thankful for, obviously, because a lot of people, during these last, well, I guess 2 years now, really, they weren't working. So like there was a lot of sudden change for a lot of people. So to be able to still go to work, as much as there was a part of me that was like, oh man, like I might be screwed if I get this virus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I can really relate to that lyrically. And I'm sure, a lot of people can as well. Like it's a very relatable song. And that's what I think drew me to it right away. And I was, aside from the fact that musically I'm listening to it and going, there's a lot going on here. Like this,
Oh yeah. Paul is an incredibly talented guitarist. He's my co-songwriter. Like before, in my previous two bands, it would just be me sitting down with an acoustic guitar and just going until I find the right chords. But with Paul, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of jazz. There's a lot of different focuses to it. So when he'll sit down and write something, I'll be like, oh my God, I can actually work with someone for once. And it's not just me, it's us working together. Having someone who has like that dynamic training, who goes in and it's just like, all right, I wrote this entire new part. What do you think of it? And I'm like, oh my God, here's the melody. Here's the melody. I can add to it. Okay, cool. Let's just get a basic recording with all these parts coming in, and I'll just hum the harmonies, and then we can bring it in with the rest of the band. And it's kind of like assembling IKEA furniture.
Yes.
Where it's just like piece by piece by piece by piece. And then when you have that fully completed thing, you're like, yes.
And
amazing.
There's no better feeling than when you're writing something. I'm sure, as you just said, you've had this before where you're writing something and you go, I got this melody stuck on my head, and you're humming it all day at work.
Yeah.
And then, Paul comes and goes, hey, I got this music. What do you think? And you're like, and it just works. There's no better feeling, right?
Well, it's because I mentioned before I was working at Amazon, and the thing about how to survive in those like really monotonous, labor intensive jobs is you got to isolate yourself from the rest of the world. And so what I would do going in is, before my shift, I would have the recordings from our practices or song layouts, and I would have them in my car, and I would play them over and over again till they got stuck in my head. So that way, when I'm on the floor, I'm just hearing the song and only the song. And so as I'm just, doing stuff, I'm humming the melodies and I'm working on doing stuff. And a lot of our songs were created while I was working on the clock, because I was able to not really think about anything except the songs that we made.
You're just sitting there in your own head, you're humming the melody yourself, and you're just like, okay, what are we trying to go with here? And that's also, like, I hear that a lot, where there's a lot of people who they have their best ideas when they're focusing on something else, right? And you ever do the old grab your phone and you ever do the phone recordings?
I've done that a couple times. I don't really do it now, primarily because I'll already have the melody going into it. The melody was already written down. It's now just trying to find the words to assemble. And a vast majority of our songs are all pretty much written like that. Like I have Post-it notes probably in my room with the original drafts of some of the lyrics. And it's good for me this is how I work, right? Like when I'm commuting or when I'm at work, because oftentimes when I try to put pen and paper and I'm just focusing on the song, I'll overshoot, or I'll make lyrics that are just like either way too pretentious or just don't work at the time. Because I'm trying to make something that's artsy, and then afterwards it's like, no, dumb it down.
I like that.
Yeah,
that's too artsy. Dumb it down, bro.
Well, it's like if you look at it and it's just like, what are you trying to do with this song? Why is this not working? Oh, this part where you're trying to come across as way too intelligent makes it seem like you're grasping at straws, and it just brings the rest of the song down. Right. Act like a normal person. Tell the story.
Exactly. That's one of my favorite songwriters of all time. His name's Clint Lowry. He plays in a band called Seven Dust. And he said it where, someone asked him about songwriting. Like, you have these beautiful songs and these really powerful songs and stories. Like, do you have a secret? And he's like, yeah, I just write like I talk. And he's like, does it make sense for radio hits and stuff? Maybe not, but he's like, you'll know, because he's like, there was a solo record he did where he was trying really hard to be very intelligent and use big words and be really artsy, so just for lack of a better term. And, it didn't come across the same, because he was just, okay, let's dumb it down. What am I trying to say? What is the story I'm trying to tell? Let's just write like how I would tell you the story, right?
Yeah. And it's not really like, because when I say dumb it down, I don't mean it needs to be accessible to people. Because I went to go see this person in a music program, and they were giving their sort of like year-end presentation. It's like, oh, I've created this very unique rhyme scheme that works off of this very cryptic beats per minute or whatever. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to it and I'm like, okay, this only works in this setting. But if you were to show up at like Horseshoe Tavern or any club, I'd immediately take one good look and say, okay, tell me when the next band is on stage.
Mm-hmm. There is something to be said. Oh, sorry.
No, it needs to be accessible.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything needs to be accessible for anyone who's listening. And, you know, if you are super worried about, oh, can I like make this super fancy and super technical? And I find that the real music that connects with people and that the general masses love for the most part is stuff that is relatable and everyone you can hum it, you can sing along to it. That's, you know, like I'd said about like with you guys and about Melancholy, like right away, there's the hook. There's the melody you can sing along to, you can hum it. I've been humming it in my head for the last week. Like it's there, right?
That was tough to do though. Like writing the first verse for Melancholy, I was having timing issues because once again, the metronome in my head is very used to 4/4, the standard pop rock stuff like that. Like if you were to give me an Oasis song, I'd be fine. But if we were to do Melancholy, like even going into the recording process, I was having timing issues, and our engineer was just looking at me going, okay, try to do it like this, try to do it like that. Okay, you're quick on this word, try to slow it down. And so it was really tough for me even trying to land the beats per minute.
Right. And especially as a vocalist, like, you know, as much as it is important to, obviously when you're recording the music, you have to be perfectly on time or else everything falls apart. But when you're doing vocals, it's like if even one line is even a little off, I almost find it's worse because it's just then you lose the entire flow of the song, right?
Well, it's one of the things that I mentioned casually to the rest of my bandmates, right? Like if we were to do a song and the guitarist or the drummer or the bassist is off by like a certain note or so, the average music listener won't be able to notice it.
Right.
But if it's a song that people have heard and they're immediately wired to the vocalist, if they're off time, almost everybody in that room will definitely notice. So it's got to be my job to make sure that when we go live, it doesn't sound off to everybody.
It's super important because even if you're, again, like I just said, a little off, the very, very average person might not understand why it doesn't quite sound the same. But fans of you guys are going to be like, oh, what's he doing tonight? What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's great, man. Well, talking about going back for a minute here, what got you started with music? Like what started this whole journey for you? What was some of the first music that you ever heard?
Some of the first, so we all kind of like start off our musical journeys by just accepting what's going on in the world around us. So for me, it was like a ridiculous amount of pop music because that's what was being shown into my head. My mom would routinely pass out with the stereo blaring, and she would have like albums like Genesis's Trick of the Tail, Amanda Marshall's debut album, Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, some Jack Soul. Meanwhile, my dad would have like cassettes in his car, and he would have like the best of the Doobie Brothers, Seal's first album, Peter Gabriel. And it kind of became like this mix between 90s pop and their influences. And then when I reached about, I want to say like 10 years old later, I started listening to more poppy rock, and I was actually like being able to choose my own, like bands like Trouble Charger, which became a huge influence in me. Our Lady Peace, which actually there's a little bit of a backstory involving Our Lady Peace that I might get into a little bit later. Sloan, Green Day, like all of those sort of influences that started to flow in me. And then when college hit, Oasis and the Britpop movement of the 90s came crashing down in a major way. And I would, in my early days, before I even got started with bands, I would like show up with an acoustic guitar. I would wear like these hippie sunglasses like Liam Gallagher, and I would sing with a Manchester accent, despite the fact that I came from Burlington. It was like people to this day walk up to me and they're just like, dude, killer set list. Thank you. We totally saw you as like a Liam Gallagher type. And I'm like, I've been working to get over that.
Like, oh, so where are you from? Burlington? Why do you sound like you're from Manchester?
Well, awesome. I dropped the accent. It took me like about 2 to 3 years, because when you start doing, I had no confidence in myself. And so the best way for me to do it is fake it till you make it.
Right.
So I would imitate a lot of the British bands that I was listening to give me that, to get me used to singing, getting me used to singing on pitch, and also getting used to not being afraid when you're doing a live show, because you're not yourself. You're pretending to be another person. You're sort of like you're playing a character, like a wrestler or something.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're, I have this conversation all the time with people too. Like when you're on stage, especially in the early days, like you just have to get in the mindset of, okay, this is someone else. This is not me. So then if there is criticism or anything like that, because you're always going to have that one person, right? You need to learn how to kind of get over that. And, oh, this isn't me. I'm playing the part of Liam Gallagher. Like this isn't me. This is different, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's the thing too, right? Like in the early days, when you are working at that and you're having all these different influences in that, you had mentioned a minute ago that you had a backstory for Our Lady Peace. So I would love to hear that. So
Our Lady Peace was one of the major bands that I listened to growing up. Rain Maida was a very interesting and intellectual songwriter. And so my first band, which was called Searching for Kim, we were getting near the end of what would probably be our collapse. It was just about to start, in a sense of our guitarist, Nate Mantle. He was no longer feeling the music. He was more of a jazz fusion kind of guy. And the songs I was writing were very punk rock, very alternative rock. So he wanted to grow above that. And I'm like, well, what if I were to do something to get us interested, to get us the wheels turning? Maybe it might save us. He's like, all right, cool. Let's see what you did. And I found a recording studio on Eastern Avenue in Leslieville in Toronto. And I was talking with a representative, some guy who went by the name of Mike Turner. And I was just sort of sitting there going, okay, well, let's arrange a day. When do you want to do it? Let's do it on Sunday. And I'm like, there was that. I was doing musical performances at AN, which is Anime North, a convention. I'm like, all right, I'll have to leave the convention circuit to stop the music performances in order to do this, but why not? And so I show up at Leslie Street, and we had arranged for, I think, 2 p.m. I'm sitting there out on the street, and like 15 minutes goes by, and I'm like, he's kind of late. 30 minutes goes by, and I'm like, did I just waste my entire afternoon? I am going to lose and I'm imagining like this older gentleman with like librarian glasses, a bit of a bald spot showing up. And I'm just like, I swear I'm going to kill like 5 minutes later, this red motorcycle just shows up and pulls up right in front of the recording studio that I'm in. And I look at the guy on the motorcycle. He swings his leg off, takes his helmet off, and it's like a dude who's in his like 40s, mid to late 40s, and he looks kind of cool. And I'm just like, he seems interesting. Are you Matt? And I'm like, oh crap. Yeah. Are you Mike? Yeah, I'm Mike. Let me just get you into the studio. And we go into this place called the Pocket Studio. We go up these staircases, and he brings me into the waiting room. And the first thing I see is Our Lady Peace, Clumsy, 1 million albums sold. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, I'm with the big boys now, aren't I? And he's just like, oh yeah. I used to play in them. You used to play in Our Lady Peace. Yeah, I founded the band. I hired Rain Maida. And in the back of my mind, I'm sweating bullets. I'm like, oh God, no. Oh no. Cool. So I guess we better get started. He takes me into one of the studios, and he pretty much lays out what we're doing. And I had gotten over a really bad vocal injury, and I was still worried about how I was going to sound on the EP. And he's just like, well, how about you play me a song? And I'm just sitting there going, I'm going to play a song to Mike Turner from Our Lady Peace.
From Our Lady Peace.
Our Lady Peace, the lead guitarist and founder of the band. And he's just like, here you go. Let me just tune it up. And he tunes it and he gives me this really, it looks like a beat to crap acoustic, but it sounds heavenly. And I'm looking at it going, what's the story with this guitar? Oh, I bought it off of Paul McCartney. And I'm just like,
like a casual thing, just like, yeah, I bought it off Paul McCartney. You know who Paul McCartney is? Like,
yeah, he's reached that level. And I'm just like, I am panicking. Like in the back of my mind, I'm panicking. On the surface, I'm like, I'm calm. But in the back, I'm like, oh my God, what if I screw this up? So I get there and I start playing Paper Crayons, which was one of our lead singles that we ended up recording for that EP. And he just listens to it and he's just like, I can work with you. Bring the rest of the guys in and we'll do this. And so for roughly about, I want to say, a week to 2 weeks, that recording studio was our home. And Mike Turner basically took me under his wing. We started talking about music.
That's
and
awesome.
He sort of like opened my eyes. And it was even more amazing was that he was dealing with food poisoning almost the entirety there. So we just like go and pick him up some like easy to digest food, come back. And there were other bands that were in the studio too. There was like Sean Desmond and Courage My Love and like a bunch of other bands like were coming and going to and from this recording studio. And unfortunately, the studio doesn't exist anymore because of a leasing issue. But yeah, I'll always remember the years and just everything that sort of went into the making of that original EP.
That's crazy. Okay, so I really quickly have to tell you this story because you're going to appreciate it now. It's a really quick story. Yeah. So I used to work in a music store and we had a student who used to always come in, really, really nice kid. And he'd always talk about his uncle and his uncle and his uncle this and uncle that. And his uncle plays in a band. And you hear stuff like that all the time at a store. And it's like, you know, his uncle plays the might play the club scene or the bar scene, which is awesome. But like, yeah, he would go on and on about his uncle and his uncle and his uncle. And so one day I'm chilling and he comes running in. He says, oh, my uncle's here. He wants to come in and see the store. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you know, bring him in. And this guy walks in and I'm looking at him and I'm watching him walk around. And I'm like, I know that guy somehow. And he comes up to the front and like we were just having a quick chat. And as he's leaving, I said, I'm so sorry. I have to ask, you're Mike Turner, correct? He goes, yeah. I was like, okay. This whole time, the kid's talking about his uncle for like a year and a half. And I'm like, yeah. That he's just like, yeah, like most casual thing. I'm like, yeah, you were like in Our Lady Peace. He's like, yeah. I'm like, cool. That's awesome, man. Like, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, he's the most chill dude that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Like there was one time where it's like I was just barely learning to drive car, and he's just like, "Here, take my car, go get some fries from the Canadian Tire that's down the street." And I'm like, I'm so much adrenaline is going through that rain's coming down, and I forget to turn on the windshields, and I'm like, I'm having a hard time trying to see. Zach, my drummer in the back, is like, turn on the windshields,
turn on the wipers, bro. Yeah. That's awesome, man. See, it's stories like that is why I love doing podcasting, right? It's literally stories like that.
Yeah. I said before, it's like if you ask the right questions, you will get stories. There's a lot that has gone in before I joined WCS and even during my time with WCS.
Absolutely. So, well, kind of on that topic, when you first formed up with the guys, like you mentioned already, like, you know, you and Paul kind of linked up, and that's really what started the whole process. But once your old band was Searching with Kim, was that the last band you were in before? So
I was in two bands before WCS, and the first band was called Searching for Kim. We lasted about 5 years, and then we all went our separate ways. And then I started a band called City in Wires, which lasted half the time, and that band just completely imploded due to infighting.
It's the worst kind.
The originally it was between me and Fahid, and it was just due to I wanted to be able to write whatever I wanted to, and I had a song that had a religious overtone in the beginning. The line, "Where I come from, there is no God, just broken homes and empty promises," and then it kicks into a rock and roll Led Zeppelin inspired thing. And Fahid, who was a devout Muslim man, didn't like the line knocking it. And so at the time, I admit I was the dick in this one. I ended up using the original line anyway. That came to words, and so he left eventually. And then we hired 2 new people, Nikki Darji and Mike Mahalik. And then when they were in there, the fighting went from me and the former guitarist Fahid to Brad and the bassist Mikey. And so as such, when that was going on, I'm just like, all right, cool. Well, I don't think we'll be able to survive this. And so Brad left to pursue teaching, and I tried to get someone to replace him. But by that time, the other members had already left, and I'm like, all right, cool, we're done. And so I had planned to retire after that band because I was feeling down and out. I had spent thousands of dollars of my own money, years of my life. And I'm just like, I don't think I'm making any progress. I don't think this is going to come. And then Paul, who was at one of our final shows at the Rock Pile, sends me a message and on Facebook. And I'm like, oh, I added this guy? All right, I guess I added this guy. All right, cool.
You never remember, right?
Well, yeah, I remember hanging out with them, right? Because Paul played in a band called Earthphonics, who showed up at the same venue that we were doing. They showed up 3/4 into our set, and I was just looking at them going, these mofos, like they're interrupting our set. They're just crashing down. I'm like, I can't believe this. And then we're done. And then they go up and I'm like, crap, they're actually good. They're actually really good. And I'm like, I got to network with these guys. And so I give my business card to everyone else. And, Paul says, hey, they're doing karaoke. You want to join? And I'm like, hell yes. So immediately after a set, we just grab our stuff, move to the side, the patio area, and just spend the night singing karaoke. And so that's how I know Paul. And he sends me a message saying, hey, Earthphonics is starting to wind down. Do you want to get something started? And I was just looking at it going, well, I've done a couple auditions for other people and it doesn't have that chemistry. I don't think I'll have that chemistry with him, but I might as well give him a trial. Yeah. So I brought him over and we end up writing our very first song, which is called Sparrow. And just immediately afterwards, I just stopped. He had left. I just stopped. I took one good look at myself and I'm like, I think I can actually do something with this. Do I really want to put the time and effort down? All right, let's do it. One last chance. This is the one last thing. And I swear, if this doesn't work, I am retiring from music. I am done. And lo and behold, we managed to write an overwhelming amount of music. We're starting to do shows. We filmed our first music video. 102.1 The Edge is interested in us. And we're just slowly but surely getting way more traction than any of the previous bands that I've done before. And so it just feels amazing. But at the same time, I'm always worried that someone's going to pull the carpet out from underneath me. Like there's always that worry.
Mm-hmm. There's a few things there that definitely we got to unpack. But on that note, like I find that a lot of people who have been in different bands, I hear that a lot, where it's like you're kind of always somewhat looking over your shoulder in a way. Like you're like, okay, when's something going to happen? And that, I guess that just comes with time. Like once you have a whole bunch of time in, you'll get more comfortable with the fact that, okay, we're not going anywhere,
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I had to unlearn because when my first band, which was called Searching for Kim, we were all young, early 20 somethings, me fresh out of college, and I'm trying to book shows. And when you don't have any real experience, they're not going to let you in. So you would have to work with promoters. And a lot of these promoters do battle of the band events. And the worst thing for me at that point was to do Battle of the Bands contests because my mental state was, rather than looking at the bands on the docket as just fellow artists who just want to try to make a name for themselves and grow, I looked at them as competition.
Yes, they're my so I gotta beat that guy there. I'm better than that band. What's going on? Yeah, and it was just the absolute worst mental state to be in. During those years, I ended up getting taken advantage of by a lot of promotional companies. And I eventually learned it's like, okay, if you're not going to do anything to possibly help us, and if you're going to hold our set list hostage and not let us perform unless we, have this money up front, then I don't want to work with you. Thank goodness, Supernova, it no longer exists. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they were just absolutely I actually have. That name has come up before on this podcast. Like it was a couple years ago, but I've heard tell of Supernova. So
it used to cost me like $200 out of pocket almost every single gig, because they would hold our set list hostage until like the day of or 2 days of. And they're like, all right, cool. Unless you want to have like a really bad time slot where no one's going to show up, you better pony up that money. And so I would go around and I'd be like, all right, I'm going to invite people. And they'd be like, all right, cool. Well, I don't have the money on me, but if you save me a ticket, I'll show up at the show. And so I would do that. And then they would usually end up, and I'm not saying this because life sometimes does get in the way.
Of course.
Sometimes you just can't make it. And so, but as a result of that, I was always finishing in the red. I was always having to fork over more and more money until eventually like it just ran dry and I was just at my wit's end.
And that's the unfortunate part about, especially those early days. Like, I mean, you know, I've heard this stories like this 100 times, right? Like we're just, you know, whether some people are doing it intentionally or not, you know, when you have a show and you're inviting people and you're expecting people to show up and you're like, okay, I'll fork over this money up front because we're going to make it back. But then if those people don't show up, you're SOL basically, right? Like you're out that money.
And I'm not saying that like I have like, because during those years, even though we were being taken advantage of, we were playing some pretty big venues.
Sure.
We played the Elma Combo twice. We got to do the Sound Academy before it closed down.
Nice.
If the band, like we also did the Mod Club, if the band stuck together, we would have that repertoire of like, hey, when we go to the negotiation table, we want to do this venue. Okay, well, what venues have you done? Well, this band has done these venues. Oh, you've done those venues? Yeah, we'll bring you on. But when the band broke up, it all of a sudden just went back to square one. It didn't matter that I personally had those venues under my thing, because the only thing
Mod
that
Club or something.
Yeah, the only thing that matters is what is your current act doing? What is your current act specialty? And so you always have to start again. And so it's that consistent thing of hiring all the members, writing new songs from scratch, investing that money into venues that may or may not give you a return. All of that, like, it was just, it was killing me mentally and emotionally. And I didn't know, and I didn't think I had the energy to keep doing that over and over again. And thank goodness WCS came to be. Actually, I'm going to tell you why we're called Worst Case Scenario.
Okay, lay it on me. I was going to ask. So that's perfect.
Yeah. So I was walking through the Square One Mall, and Paul and I had been doing acoustic performances for the Mississauga Arts Council. Going in, and they'd have like a church where we'd show up and we would play music. And we were doing sort of these indie things there and at Falchier's, but it was primarily just us as an acoustic duo. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking with my sister Kathy as we're walking through. And I'm like, I have no idea if we're going to find the right people for our band. Like, we can find a drummer, we can find a bassist, but they might not be the right people for the setup. And I'm looked at her and I'm like, worst case scenario, we'll just be an acoustic duo. And she just turned to me and said, that's it. And I'm like, what's it? That's the name of your band. And I'm like, that's the name of my band. That's the name of your band. That's the stupidest band name I have ever heard. I'm going to send it to Paul. I send it to Paul. He's just like, yeah, let's name ourselves that. You're sure? Yes, I'm sure. All right. I guess we're worst case. And so I abbreviate it. So if you look online, if you find us on iTunes or on Spotify, you'll know that instead of saying worst case scenario, it shows WCS. And the reason why is there's like 5 other bands that are named worst case scenario, and sort of BTS is popular. It still is popular. And I'm like, they managed to do well with their abbreviated name, even though they don't use their original name, which is Burn the Stage. All right, so let's just abbreviate it and see how it works. And so that's why we're known as WCS, even though every single promoter will refer to us as worst case scenario. Yeah.
As did I. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome, though. It's funny. It's funny, though, how sometimes band names can come up with that. One of my all-time favorites. Big shouts to my friends in Nothing Serious. Hey, this new band you guys are forming. Yeah, it's nothing serious, man. Don't worry. It's just, we're just having fun. And it stuck. literally just, and that's what's so fun about music, right? You can literally do whatever you want.
Oh yeah. You do have to worry because once again, like you want to, so I say this from a marketing standpoint. When we did Worst Case Scenario, there were like warning signs going off in my head because I'm like, there's already a band called Worst Case Scenario. Mm-hmm. There's a problem if we start getting bigger, right? Like, will it be a legal problem? Will it cause issue? And that was sort of my major thing. I am always thinking long-term as opposed to short-term. And I'm like, okay, if we do it where we are abbreviated, we should be able to get away with this. It shouldn't cause a major issue, but there is a thing where it's just like, if it ever does turn into an issue where it's just like, you need to change your name, we need to have some kind of backup just in case. Cause you never
worst case scenario, you can just change the name, right?
Yeah. Worst case Ontario.
Worst case
Yes.
That's gotta be it, man. Worst case Ontario, bud. That's it. That's fantastic. Well, a couple of things I want to go back to for a minute.
Yeah.
First and foremost, what's the karaoke set list like? I'm curious.
So the karaoke set list depends entirely on our emotions and what goes into it. But the song that I was doing that sort of won Paul over is he's just like, oh, you got to do Oasis. And I'm like, I got to do Oasis. I'm tired of being compared to Oasis. Yeah. Just start singing Stop Crying Your Heart Out. And I'm like, all right, cool. Nice. And he's got like a recording of me somewhere up there on one of my Instagrams of me singing it. And that was the exact day that me and Paul sort of clicked. When we were filming the music video for Show Me the Light, like the rest of the guys were sort of drinking to keep up the energy because we got there at 8 p.m. and we didn't stop until around 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And, they're drinking, they're having fun. And in the meantime, we broke into like Wonderwall 4 times throughout the night just because we needed something to do. And the lights were just bright and we were just like, screw it. Is pizza coming? Pizza doesn't matter. We'll just do it. I said, maybe. And I'm like,
it's like, give me an E minor 7th, bro. Let's do it.
Does that have a capo on the 2nd fret? It does now.
It does now, man. That's it. Anytime I pick up a guitar and I have a capo, I'm just like, yep, it has to happen.
The interesting thing about the Show Me the Light music video, because it was my first music video and the rest of the guys might have, like, especially in Earthphonics, they've done music videos before, but for me, this was a really special thing. But this was right before the lockdown, going into the coronavirus pandemic, because we were filming the music video, and then we had 2 shows that were lined up. One at Sneaky D's, which unfortunately that was canceled as a result of the pandemic, and then one at the Hideout, which not only was canceled because of the pandemic, but also the venue went under. And so as such, trying to book shows as we're living in a post-COVID world, it's still raging on, but like, there's a lot of concern and there's a lot of like, because venues want to get people who can put asses in seats, who can sell tickets, who can basically go to the bar and earn them as much money as possible, because all music venues are hurting. And I feel sorry for a lot of new up and coming artists and bands like us who don't 100% know what their fan base is, don't 100% know what their audience draw is going to be. And so when you go to the negotiation table and they look at you and go, how many people can you bring in? Because they're worried about going under. But at the same time, you need to get that experience. You need to slowly build and grow and get those people in. And so we're kind of stuck in this catch-22 of uneasiness of we don't know how it's going to go. But the only thing we can do is keep going forward with everything that we got and absolutely pray that by the time the dust settles, we're still standing.
Absolutely, man. Well, I think you guys are headed in the right direction. I mean, it's adding stuff to the new resume, right? It's always building, like you were saying, what you did in the past, unfortunately, those promoters aren't going to care that, oh, I played a great club like the Mod Club. Like, that's a big deal. But, so like, you guys played the Mod Club? Well, technically I did. And it's like,
but so I have it funny because one of the people that I'm in talks with now is Craig Lasky of the Horseshoe Tavern. And he's just sitting there going, I don't know how things are going to go, but are you capable of playing the Horseshoe, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, I've already played the Horseshoe twice. But I'm like,
so yes.
But I don't tell them that, right? But I'm just like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've sent you emails before, you just don't remember the previous bands. So it's an unfortunate side effect of the times, but you got to just like dust yourself off and just see how things go.
Right now, you guys have actually just played your first show back too, did you not? Not that long ago?
Yeah, we did our show at Living Color. It used to be known as Tale of the Junction, which actually, funnily enough, Tale of the Junction was the last venue that we did before the pandemic as well.
Oh, wow.
So it was this bizarre sort of chapter closed, chapter beginning type of situation.
That's actually super cool.
Have you ever been to Tale of the Junction?
I have not, no.
Okay. So Tale of the Junction is like this really interesting bar in a sense of, if you are watching music inside the bar, it is an awful venue to hear because the walls are so close together that all the sound reverberates and you're going to obviously overload. Wear earplugs, kids. That's all I have to say. But if you are in the parking lot, like there's so if you follow from, there's the bar and then there's like the sound guy right at the end of the bar, and there's a small hallway and there's this open door. You go out through the open door and you can like see the venue from the open door, but like there's out in the parking lot with all these different cars in the back, and you are getting perfect sound not inside of the venue. And they have like Christmas lights that they had hanging up, and that it illuminated the area, and it became this awesome sort of hangout spot where basically bands and other people trying to watch the show would just hang out in the parking lot and catch the rest of it. And I don't know why, but when we were doing our set, everybody just sort of ran straight forward to the front of the stage. And I'm like, are we doing good here? What
is this a good thing?
Because I'm looking around, right? Like there weren't a lot of people in the front because once again, the sound quality was awful. But like by the time we were taking the stage, like more and more people were all sort of like heading towards us, and we're like, I'm just like, why are you not in the parking lot? Should I take this as a sign that we're doing good and I can start booking bigger and bigger shows? Or is this just a result of just people are drinking now and they're more relaxed and loosey goosey? Like I'm trying to gauge it for the negotiation side. And a lot of that success also came down to some of the other bands that were on the docket that night. Like there was this one band called Pink Leather Jackets that are just killing it right now. They have this sort of like early 2000s sort of pop, not pop, early 2000s punk sort of vibe. Okay. And they just had all these people that were sort of going along. And I'm like, not really my sound, but like a lot of these people are here to see them and they're digging us. So we need to start doing more shows with these guys. We need to start reaching out and seeing how things go. So that was that show. We have nothing currently booked for September, and the reason why primarily is because Paul is getting married.
Well, congratulations to Paul.
Yeah, Paul's getting married on the 17th, and I'm like, it would make more sense if I just sort of hold back. Yeah. And the next show that we have is on October 8th, where we are playing at Sneaky D's, nice. Legendary Toronto dive bar that does punk shows. You go for the nachos, you stay for the bands. And I am pumped up, but once again, because we're coming out of the pandemic, I do not know where our momentum shifts, because we have people that are interested in us, but it's too early to sort of tell and to make those big gambles. Like before the pandemic, we would have 25 to 30 people of our own crew that were just our friends that and eventual fans that were intrigued in what we were doing.
Sure.
And then with the pandemic came down, we had a mass of people. And I don't know if that's just because they're starving for live acts, if they are intrigued with what we do, or if those very same people that were at Living Color are going to bother coming to our new show. There's always that sort of gamble. And so as such, it's like, it's too early to call, but I hope that we're building momentum, that we're gaining that fan base that we so desperately need.
Sure. And I mean, I hope that that's what happens to you guys as well, man. And I mean, one thing that I think that we're going to see especially locally, like, I mean, obviously, we're not quite the same locally because you're more out in the Toronto area and I'm out here in Peterborough. But
yeah,
I think what we're going to see is a bit of a renaissance in the live music scene, which then for a band like yourself, that's really good, because as much as, you need to build up your fan base and add to the resume, so to speak, having people who are just like, oh, I want to go to a show. Who's playing? Who's this band? I don't know, but let's go check them out. And then next thing you know, someone who was just there to hear random live music is like, yo, these guys are awesome. Where are they playing again next? Like, hopefully that, gets the ball rolling even more for you guys, right?
Fingers crossed. There's a lot of unfortunate things that, once again, you have to deprogram from your brain in order to work in this creative field. And so as such, you are your own worst critic. And so when I go and do a live show and I'm just like, why are there not more people? Like in the early days, why are there not more people? Why is there something seriously wrong with me? Is there something that I need to improve to get better? And then you look at other musicians that, like, you've done shows with that are instantly becoming big and stuff like that. Like there were bands like the OBGMs, which I got to see, and I knew Denzel. He was my banker, surprisingly, before they made it big on a Budweiser commercial. There were people that were like the Dirty Nil, who showed up at my very first concert when we were opening for the Stereos, and like now they're being played on 102.1 The Edge. And I'm like, I'm looking at that, and you should never judge another person's success, because there's all different things that go into becoming successful in music, right? There's raw talent, there's dumb luck, there's the connections that you make, and sometimes just blind nepotism. It's like a combination of those four that determines whether or not you become successful in music. And you should never compare yourself to other people, because they've got a completely different setup than what goes on with you. But as such, me, who's consistently like in my own head, is just like, what do I need to do to get to the next stage? And sometimes there's nothing you really can do. It's just, you have the right sound, but you're not at the right time, or you've got all of this, but you don't know how to properly network, and you need to work on that type of thing. So that's kind of the nature of the beast. Like I'm trying to be optimistic, but at the same time, repeated sort of failure is what's keeping me grounded and is preventing me from sort of looking at this going, it's do or die. There's no tomorrow. Let's charge forth into the breach type of thing.
Which is a great attitude to have, but also it's keeping it being, and I can absolutely relate to everything you're saying too, right? Yeah. Like just it's keeping yourself moving forward with optimism, but also understanding that, you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have that something might happen. And it's like, people can get really jaded really quickly when they have that, because it's like you said, oh, how come I'm not where this band is? Or how come I'm not where that is? Like, once you kind of get over that, and it's just like, at the end of the day, we all start doing something creative because we love doing it, right? That should be the first and foremost. And you can tell just by the way you talk about things that you know how much you love doing it. As much as you were saying you were ready to retire, it's like I wouldn't have been shocked if a year or so in you were like, I mean, maybe we can get going with something else, right?
My major thing, because everyone else has sort of like a different motivation for why they get into music. And for me, I consider myself a live musician. My main goal is to create a feeling. And what I mean by that is I went to go see Oasis perform at Toronto Center Island. This was during their last tour, and Liam sounded awful, but there was this amazing sense of euphoria and overwhelming joy and anticipation behind seeing bands like Oasis, Paul Weather, Danko Jones, Silver Sun Pickups, like all of these bands sort of crammed together in this overwhelming sort of like euphoria that sort of swept across everybody that was there. And I'm like, if I want to do live music, I want to create that sort of feeling in other people. I want them to, I don't really care about like fame or signing a multi-level record deal. What I want to do is I want to help inspire and help like motivate and just put on really decent shows that will last in the hearts and minds of the people that attended them.
That's a beautiful thought, man. At the end of the day, that's that's how it should be, right? That, and a lot of people can lose sight of that when you start to have some success. So you start to have a show where people are running to the front of the stage and you're like, what's going on here? Oh, maybe we're, I'm a big deal. Get out of my way. People ran to the stage to hear me, so it's good to hear that. And especially, with time that you have in, man, like, 10 years in, that's no small feat. Right. So it's cool to hear that that's still kind of the attitude at this point.
Yeah. It was very, like, it is very easy to lose yourself. There have been some times in my journey where I have lost myself. There have been some times where I have become egotistical. I'm the lead singer of a band. That's going to happen. You
should really, to a point, I think you kind of have to, right? That's almost,
I had that smacked out of me real quickly though, during those early years. It's like, Matt, you don't, like, you're from Burlington. You have maybe about 15 people that attend your early shows. You are not Jesus. Tone it down. You are
from Burlington. Okay.
You are from Burlington. You know what? I say this with Burlington with love in my heart.
Of course.
Burlington is the home place for Finger 11, Walk Off the Earth, and technically Jim Carrey. You know what they did? They immediately left Burlington when they wanted to actually go anywhere. Well, it's Burlington. What's fun to do in Burlington? Pack up your stuff and move. There's nothing.
That's it. That's the extent of it. I think there's a Cineplex. That's it. That's all there is.
Burlington used to be a great place for live music. It really did. A lot of the bars, though, ended up closing down. And as such, there's next to no place other than the Sound of Music Festival, which comes out during Father's Day weekend. And the thing about the Sound of Music Festival is it's a giant corporate event. And what I mean by that is you're getting big name bands like the Headstones, like Rush, like Sloan, like all of those people that are going to perform. So if you're like a new band starting off, you're not going to get in there. And on top of that, there's like entrance fees and different like networks that you have to do in order to get there. So for me, just sort of looking at it going, it's like throwing a concert in a school for the deaf. It's just like, this isn't going to work for me. I need to leave.
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. It's just, and you get that, right? Like, it's obviously every band wants to get into the GTA and play shows there because that's where, so many different bands have made it. But then, you're making noise along with 100 or sometimes even a few hundred other bands. Right. So then it's like, okay, what can we do to be different? What can we do to be separate? And it's great to come from a town where maybe there's not as much noise being made, but no one's listening. So it's like, it's kind of finding the balance, right?
Yeah. Like, because once again, I live in Mississauga now, and the biggest problem with Mississauga is that it has potential, but there aren't the venues. Yeah. There isn't that music scene. Like right outside my place, there's the Living Arts Center and there is Celebration Square, which are two giant pavilions. And the like being able to go in there and perform there, that's not going to happen unless you have the right connections. There's no sort of entry level place. And that's also one of the reasons why we ended up leaving the Mississauga Arts Council, because it was great when we were doing an acoustic duo. But then when we started bringing in Mikey and we started bringing in Mario to form this band, there was no real ability for us to spread our wings and grow. We would just, we would show up and we would do 2-song set lists. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but we've got at least 45 minutes material. Even now with the pandemic over, we've got like 24 songs written. We've got enough to do like 2 albums. We need to start finding places that are going to book us and give us that room to breathe. And so as such, that's why we flocked to Toronto, just because there is no real sense of opportunity unless you're already in the know with the right people.
You have those connections.
Yeah. And so we don't have that. So Toronto is sort of our where we can make our names for ourselves and see where it takes us.
Well, that's it. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I'm sure that we're going to have another conversation in a few months or whatever. And you're going to be like, oh yeah, we're playing here. And that's what I hope happens, man. Absolutely. Hope. Absolutely. So, well, one thing I want to make sure I ask about that you mentioned kind of quickly, and I know it was a really cool thing for you, and that was you guys were played on 102.1 The Edge, correct?
Yes. So there was this contest going on called the Summer Song Showcase, where it's like you and a bunch of other bands, you submit your track for the summer, and our panel will then vote that stuff down, and then we'll out of everyone who applies, there'll be like 10 songs that we think are good to go, and then from those 10, you can vote for them, and some of our members of our panel will vote for them, and both winners will walk away with like $10,000 in order to do the song. And so in doing the promo for it, like I just casually sent it off, and I'm used to not getting any sort of reply or response or anything like that, right? It's just one of those things where it's just like send out to a venue, cool, go on, pretend like everything else is all right. And so I'm in my car, and I get a text message from one of my old high school, grade school classmates, right? And I'm just like, weird. I'm surprised I'm still on this person's friends list. And they're just like, hey, so we heard, congratulations. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, 102.1 The Edge. 102. What? Yeah. And I'm driving my car, right? Like I came back from picking up groceries, and I'm stopped at a red light, and I'm like, all right, might as well take a look. And I open up my phone, and they're showing the music video for Show Me the Light, and immediately it just like adrenaline straight into the heart. I'm like, holy smokes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can't breathe. I'm breathing, right? This is real life. This is happening right now, isn't it?
That's awesome, especially growing up in the area, right? Like we're a little outside of the GTA in Burlington there too, but 102.1 The Edge, like that's a huge deal.
So yeah, like for me, 102.1 The Edge sort of holds like a special part of my heart. It was one of the places that I was trying to get into when I graduated journalism, and unfortunately, I did not make the cut. But like years later, to go from I didn't manage to become an intern at 102.1 The Edge to they're now sharing our music video. I'm like, oh my God. Senpai cool noticed me. Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. That's awesome. And I love hearing stuff like that, right? So that's awesome. Well, one question I always like to ask is kind of as we get ready to wrap it up here, it's kind of a staple question here.
Okay.
It's a two-parter.
Okay.
I want to know your worst show story that you have, whether it was just a really bad show or it was something comical that happened.
How much time do we have? Because I've got a Hindenburg, like a major one it'll probably top any person that you have on this.
Ooh, okay. Well, I need to hear that, whatever that story is, because that's what we like to hear. And then I want to hear your favorite show that you have ever played.
Okay. So let's get started with the absolute worst. So, my very first band, Searching for Kim, started out originally, like I'd been doing auditions for all these other groups, but they did not, they weren't looking for someone with my vocal capabilities. They wanted something with rasp. They were going for like a mix between metal and Dave Grohl. A lot of the places, I'm not saying all of the people I auditioned for, but that was the vibe that they were going for. Sure. And so I put together an audition with another band that went completely sideways. And I ended up grabbing the guitarist from that, whose name was Ben. And I reached out and tried to find people who could apply on Craigslist and Kijiji. And one person replied, because I'd been doing it for like refresh every couple weeks. And they're like, hey, man, I've been seeing your posts. I just want to let you know, keep hustling, keep doing stuff. And I'm like, good that you're seeing my posts. Are you interested in joining my band?
Wait, what? Like, that's a weird kind of.
Yeah. So we arranged to meet the drop, and I picked up my guitarist, whose name is Sean. And then Will, who was a drummer, who I don't know how exactly. I know Will was also in Sheridan College with me, but he was in a different class. So maybe he responded to me, or maybe we got to conversation. I don't know, but Will joined, and we were a 4-piece band that was originally called The Cranes, because we had a song called Paper Cranes. And it would eventually splinter into what became Searching for Kim. But I was trying to get us booking shows, and with no live experience whatsoever, that became hell on earth. Our local college at the end of the year at Sheridan College, the pub that they had called The Connection. It's now known as the Marquee, but at the time it was like a dance club thing called Connection. And they're like, we're doing Battle of the Bands. And if you go and your band is selected, you could perform here and open for a big name artist. Okay, well, who have you had? Well, last year was the Trues, and I'm like, okay,
big deal.
that's a very big deal. Okay, cool. We will see to that. We will train up and we will get what we can. And so we had to go submit the songs that we had for the online voting system that they had going on. Our recordings were awful. Let me just say that first and foremost. I recorded it off of my phone in a rehearsal room, which had like so much warbly sound because we were poor. We had no idea what we were doing. We were very like 1980s English DIY. So we sent our recordings in, and we did not make the cut. And I was feeling so sad and downtrodden, but Chuck Ehrman, who was the bar manager, said, it's not over, right? And I'm like, what do you mean it's not over? We've got a lightning round where like the bands that are accepted are fine, but if you get the most votes, you can get people to vote to do the show. And I'm like, so it's not over. It's not over. Okay, well, let's try to get as many people as we can to vote for us. And after like about a day or two, because you could actually see the vote tallies. You could actually vote once per day. And so I was looking at the vote tallies, and I was looking at the other band, and I'm like, they were getting ridiculous numbers into the thousands. And I'm like, how the hell do they have that many people? Like, why have I not heard of them if they got that many?
Yeah,
and then,
thousands of people.
Yeah. And then I refreshed the page, and I noticed it was allowing me to vote more than once. And I'm like, that's how they're doing it. They're not tracking the ISB numbers. You could just refresh the page and keep voting. So immediately, like I'm in the middle of my finals, right? And I'm just like spending my nights over at the learning comms, refresh. And eventually I caught up with them. They noticed it. And then it became like a back and forth. Thing. Yeah, they start doing the same thing, back and forth. It unfortunately, my second year anniversary with the girl that I was dating, I looked at her and I'm like, I'm sorry, this takes precedence.
Sorry, honey. I know this is important, but like this is more important. Sorry.
This is more important. This is more important to us. So she was like, okay, she wasn't the most pleased, but she knew how much this meant to me,
sure,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
And so eventually the student union caught wind of this because they were looking at it going, why do these two bands have over 10,000 people?
Oh my
This
goodness.
doesn't make any goddamn sense. So they realized, and so they're like, okay, we've realized the problem. We're going to reset the count, and now we're going to get it to track ISP numbers. So you won't be able to vote using the same computers. And if you're doing the Learning Commons, they will keep track of that, right? So immediately it went from, okay, we're now back at zero. How do we get this? Well, one of the things that I did, because I started music and I also started YouTube at the same time. I became a YouTuber. And I did like acoustic covers, and I also did video game reviews. And so I was building a following through that on various different social media platforms. And so I would go to forum boards and I'd be like, hey, my band is trying to get their first show at this local event. If any of you guys would be willing to vote or do anything just to help us out, it would be greatly appreciated. I don't want to spam advertise. I don't want to overstep my bounds, but anything that you could do would mean the world to me. And so I had people from all over the world voting from us, people in Australia, awesome. People in Japan, people in America, just to get us our first show. And we did that. And like this entire time, I'm just a bundle of nerves. Like I'm not sleeping. I'm not taking care of myself because I'm putting everything I can into this. And so we get accepted to do this show. And so we're ready. We're doing a 20-minute set list. We've got it down to maybe about like 4 or 5 songs. We have more than that, but we got 4 or 5 songs, and we're being told, oh yeah, this is going to be televised as well. And I'm like, I'm sorry. What? It's going to be. It's going to be televised as a cross Ontario Battle of the Bands that all the other people can watch on the student television stuff, and it's going to be judged by Sony record label execs. And like, I'm sitting there shaking, like visibly shaking. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm stressed to the max because I've never done a live show before. There's all this pregame jitters. Like, I've done solo acoustic stuff at the campus pub, but that's about it. And so going into it, the absolute worst things begin to happen. And so the weekend before the show, so I'm talking like maybe, I think the show might be on Wednesday or Thursday. So Friday, the week before, our guitarist, Ben, immediately says, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, Ben, what do you mean? You can't, like, we have our first show coming up. Our names are on the bill. We've got to do this show. And he's just like, my parents had said, you know, I need to focus on school and, you know, get my head in the game. Cause he was still in high school or whatever. Sure. And I'm just sitting there going, oh no. Cause I wrote the songs, yeah, but I've got timing issues up the wazoo. I'm not a guitarist or anything like that. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do? So Ben left, and I flagged down this metal guy that I knew who was a mutual friend between me and my girl at the time. And he's just like, hey, you need help with this or whatever? And I'm like, okay, we're going to grab us. We're going to get in this rehearsal room and we're going to play for like 3 hours. And when we're not in class, I'm going to meet you with a guitar in hand. We're going to learn these songs and do the best that we possibly can. And so we're getting ready to go and do the show. And once again, all these pregame nerves, all these pregame jitters are racking me. Like, I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, I'm not doing well. I'm purely a vocalist. Like, I'll write the songs outside of the show, but don't expect me to play the guitar stuff unless, of course, it's basic stuff. And so I'm getting my guitar and my stuff tuned up, and it's just like, okay, well, the band that you're going to be opening for is this band called the Stereos. I had never heard of them before. You know who the Stereos are?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you do.
Yes.
So there's that. There's the two other bands that are there, and so we're all just talking, and we're brought into the green room, and we're told that there is some of the gear that has been taken from Long McQuaid hasn't shown up yet. Gear like, for example, stuff that fastens the drums together, and the pieces will arrive. If not before the show, they can probably do something during the first set list. Since we were the wild card, we're going on first with incomplete gear.
Oh no.
And like, once again, I'm trying to keep a brave face, but it's like in the back of my mind, everything that can go wrong is going wrong. We're supposed to be interviewed by the media arts team that is there. Media arts is the major filmmaking course. This is like the 3-year, $4,000, I think, course or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, we're getting our gear set up or whatever, but we'll interview you before it's time to go. And so we're getting ready, and we don't have the time to interview you. So unfortunately, you're just going to be going up and, you know, introducing yourselves. And this band is called the Cranes. And I'm like, oh God, please make this stop. So we're up and we're tearing through the set, and I have a recording of the set, and it definitely sounds like I don't have a lot of live experience. We're having time issues. Will, our drummer, goes to hit the cymbals, and the cymbals aren't properly put together on the stand. So when he hits it hard, the cymbal hangs off of the rim. He's hitting the kick drum, and the kick drum isn't, the pedal isn't properly fastened.
It's not fastened to the drum.
So when he's hitting it, it starts moving forward and forward and forward and forward and forward. And so, like, I'm doing the very best that I possibly can, but like, I'm in my head, I'm coming apart at the seams. We're on our final song. And once again, this is being judged by Sony Record music executives. This is being broadcast all across Ontario.
All over Ontario, yeah.
All Ontario for people that are interested in this. And we're in the final song, which is a punk song called Song A. And we're about like 3/4 into it when we go over time and they cut us off. Everything goes dead. All the amps, everything, we can't hear each other anymore. And so I take one last look, one immediate look of defiance, because once again, everything has crashed and burned in front of me. In the very least, I can go out the same way I came in as punk rock. And I just flipped the crowd off and I said, "Thank you for bringing us along, Sheridan. Go f yourself. Good night." And I knock the mic off the microphone stand and I just leave the rest of the show. It was the absolute worst show that I have ever done. I made a vow. It's like, if I'm ever going to do this again, it was my first show. And I made a vow. I'm like, if I'm ever going to do this again, it cannot be that bad. If it becomes that bad again, hang it up, boys, we're done. And thankfully it's never been that bad. And that was sort of like my engagement, my baptism into the music scene. And it was also a band, the night I heard of some no-name band who came in from Hamilton that wasn't even responsible for this contest, called the Dirty Nil. So that was where, I was introduced to them. And then, I was so distraught that I just could not deal with the rest of the show for the rest of the night. I ended up getting so ridiculously nervous that like immediately after the show, like the day of, I had to call in sick just because of how all of that was going through my system. And then I showed up for my news class on, I believe Wednesday, the week later, and they're talking about the Battle of the Bands thing. And then I'm looking out because the news class, they're looking at B-roll, and eventually they see me and they're like, "Matt, you were involved in this?" And I'm like, I was involved in it. Yes, that was a thing that did happen.
That's me.
Yeah. So that was the absolute worst show that I have ever done. And thank goodness it's never been that bad. I've had some close stuff. Like there was some times where immediately I followed Lights. Like she showed up at Sheridan College and I'm just like, all right, I might as well, if no one else is going to go up, I might as well go up. And so I'm like tuning up and I plug my guitar in and there's like some drunk jackass like, "Play Freebird." And I'm like, this is the hell that is my life. So there's a lot that I have been through, but that was the absolute worst show that I've done.
That's definitely, I've heard a lot of really bad ones. I'm not going to lie, over the years, but that's definitely got to be one of the worst.
It's like, I would be somewhat okay if it wasn't for the fact that it's like, okay, I'm the singer. I'm not supposed, and my guitar playing has gotten a lot better. When I was in City and Wires, I was the rhythm guitarist. But like that first thing, like I wrote the songs and I gave them to the rest of the guys. I had timing issues. I didn't know how to properly play my instruments. And I'm like, I have no choice. Ben has left the group. Someone needs to help the guy that I hired just to help keep the pace, and so that there is some form of complexity to the rest of it.
Definitely.
So that was the worst show I've ever done. What was the second parter?
I wanted to know for the last thing we're going to talk about, what the best show you've played, or your favorite, one of the whatever works. So
it's difficult to say. And I mean this because most of the shows that I've done are pluses and minuses. Sure. There have been ones where the outpouring is overwhelmingly positive, but there are things that, unfortunately, because of things that are going on in the background, bring it down to a negative, which prevent it from truly shining in my eye. So I'm going to say two things. I'm going to say two shows that are probably my favorite. And the first one, and this sounds cliche, was the last one that we did. And the only reason why I'm saying the last one that we did was because there was a lot of concern going in. It's like, I don't know if if what the music scene's going to like. What if nobody shows up? What if nobody's interested in what we sound like on top of that? So we walked in, and just knowing that all the people that were out in the parking lot just immediately came right into the venue and were just like, hell yes. It was the one time where I'm just sitting there going, man, I wish we had money for merch. So that
we
was
need a t-shirt.
So that is the one that we're tied. So the other one that it's tied with, it was in my first band called Searching for Kim. And unfortunately, one of the biggest problems with Searching for Kim, we had great songs. We were rough. We needed some help with stage presence. But one of the things that was sort of the crux is that we never really had a consistent lineup. There was always people coming and going, where I would have to hire new people, and that would stop our momentum from being able to build. We had one show the day, I'm not 100% sure, but it took place, I believe, in April of 2012 at the Mod Club in downtown Toronto. Rest in peace, Mod Club. It's now It's gone under. It's now known as the Access Club. But we had been signed on to do a show with Landmark Entertainments was the promoter, and they were doing one of those things where it's a battle of the bands, where the bands start as early as possible, and how much money and how many tickets are sold determines your place in the night. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where it's a massive popularity contest, because you sell the most tickets, hey, you're going to get prime real estate. So we had been going into the show, we had practiced, and I was once again feeling tense. The best shows that I ever do are ones where I just don't give a damn anymore, just because there's no anxiety, there's no animosity. So I could just go and focus on the music and tear it up the way I know how to do. And so we had brought the money to Landmark Entertainments, and they had looked at us and said, this is how much money you've gotten. Like, you don't expect us to put you on like at a prime time. And I'm like, you held our set list hostage. How do you expect anyone to just book an entire day off and not have responsibilities, life or work? Like, people need to do things. And I said, you know something, you can either let us do the show or you can go F yourselves. And I'm censoring myself because I quite honestly told Landmark Entertainments, you can quite honestly go yourselves. So I looked at them and I'm like, okay, well, they didn't take us off the set list. They're saying that we can go. And I can't remember what time. Like, it was on a Sunday afternoon. It was either 2 p.m. or 6 p.m. It was one of the two. It was just an ungodly time to be performing.
Not a great time to play. Yeah.
Not a real great time to play. And so we went there, and there were people that were still like, even though it was early in the day, there were some diehards that were there to see other bands. And we were sitting there, and it became like, there were some interesting bands, but it got to the point where it became like really older metal bands, the dime a dozen, not really doing anything new. They all kind of blur and sound into one. And I'm just like, oh God. And I looked at us, and we were wedged between those two metal bands, right? And so a lot of people had gone over to the bars to get drinks. They weren't really noticing or looking or anything. And so we tune up our guitars, and one of the photos actually is from that gig where I'm wearing this leather jacket and I've got my guitar in there, and I immediately hear from the crowd, oh good, someone listens to Noel Gallagher. And I'm like,
like,
so
yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, of course. I'm always going to get those comparisons, jackass. And I'm tuning up. I'm ready to go. And I'm like, all right, I don't give a damn about what other people think. I don't give a damn about the people that are in the audience. I certainly don't give a damn about the promoter. I'm just going to go in and treat this like it's a practice and just tune the rest of the audience out. And this is actually what I do when I do my stage performances, right? For me, I see the people that are in the audience, but I'm channeling kind of like how I am in my room when I'm just, playing guitar, or I'm just sort of doing lip sync karaoke to one of my favorite songs. I get like full into it. And so we start doing it. We start tearing through our set. And I think like 2 to 3 songs in, I look over and the stage is shaking. And I'm like, why is the stage shaking? And I look down, and there's people that are jumping off the stage. And I just stop for a very brief second. And I just like, we finished doing the songs. And the funny thing about this entire setup is because it's in the afternoon, there's not a lot of people. There's maybe about like 25 to 30 people. There's huge gaps. Like if you were to try to stage dive, you could probably like fall and not have anyone catch you. But there were people that were diving off of the stage, and I'm just sitting there going, holy smokes, I think we're on to something here, boys. And so we had the most fun was just knowing that, like, even though there was barely anyone that was there performing, knowing that we had an audience of people that were captivated, that were digging us, that were digging our set list and our sound. It is one of the things that I will always carry deep, ever closer to my heart. And I said it to you earlier in the show. I honestly meant it. Like, if Searching for Kim had better luck, and if I was better at being able to communicate and to build those relationships and get things underway, we definitely would have become we would have become way bigger than where we were. Now that I've spent 10 years honing my craft, learning my like getting better as a songwriter, being able to craft my stage presence, being able to work well with other people, and all of this that has been going through after, 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, we have a lot of potential. And if things go right, we could become something huge. So keep watching, and I guarantee you're not going to miss us anytime soon.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Well, real quick, how can people find you if they're looking to find you guys on the social medias?
Okay, so we're all over the place pretty much. We are on Instagram. You can find us under, I think it's, give me a second. I'm going to get out my phone. I should have had all of this set up before, but so I'm going here. Yes. So if you were to take a look at us, we are on Instagram, Worst Case Scenario GTA, which stands for Greater Toronto Area, where we pretty much update almost daily. We have our Facebook page, which is Worst Case Scenario Toronto. We also have stuff that is available under most major retailers, such as the Apple Store, the iTunes Store, Spotify. All of that is under WCS. If you were to type in like WCS Show Me the Light, or Tears in the Rain, which was our second single, and our latest one, Melancholy, it's all there. If you want personal stuff involving me, all of my stuff is under my YouTube channel. I'm doing this more as Worst Case Scenario, but I might as well do a promo for my solo stuff, because what am I? Am not an egotistical marketer. So if you enjoy what I do video game reviews, anime reviews, movie reviews. I also do Twitch. All you got to do is go to google.com, either on twitch.com/ or youtube.com/SonicMTD, capital S, small O, small N, small I, small C, capital M, capital T, capital D. And I guarantee you're going to love what you see. But either way, later days.
I love it, man. And I'll have some links down below too, folks. If you're watching this on the YouTube, or you're listening to this on the audio version, I'll have some links down below. And we are going to leave you guys with the brand new single from WCS, Melancholy, right here on the Hotter Show. Mathew, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It has been an honor. This song sounds upbeat and cheerful.
Slowly going crazy.
All right, guys, there you have it. My chat with Mathew from WCS. Hope that you enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun on that chat, as you guys could tell, especially once we really got rolling. We just had a blast just kind of shooting back and forth. And he was a great guest. So, Mathew, thank you very much, my man, for coming on and for being such a great guest and being so candid. Always makes doing these so much fun when we can just have a nice fun back and forth and share some laughs and stuff. That's why I do this podcast. So I had a lot of fun with Mathew. Again, I have all the links down below in the description of this video, or if you're listening to this on the audio version of the Harder Show on either Spotify or Anchor or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Bullhorn or however you're listening, be sure to look down below for the links to WCS because they very much deserve your support. So do my sponsors, the people who help make this show possible. My name is Jason Reese from Jaybird Digital Arts. And of course, my friends at Mean Beard. Thank you so very much for all the support, guys. Keeping my beard feeling fantastic and keeping the Harder Show looking great with all of its graphic design needs. Now, we will, over the next couple of weeks, you guys might notice some small changes happening with my background here. I'm still kind of figuring things out in the new place, as you can probably guess, but we're good. It's happy. Mood's all good. We're all settled in and all that stuff. I apologize. The last few weeks have been a little rocky, but I am back in the swing of thing now and very, very excited to have some really, really fantastic content coming up. Next week, I believe we will be chatting with my boy, Maddie Lane. So very excited about that. We're going to be doing a showcase of his EP that came out, I think it was about a month ago now, Songs I Play in the Dark. So we're going to do a deep dive on that and also talk about some other stuff that Matt has coming up. So very, very excited about that. I got some other interviews that I just lined up this morning that I'm super excited about. One of them is going to be with a brand that I've been supporting for a couple of years now, but I've never really had them on the show. So I'm very excited about that. It is a really fun brand. And I think you guys are going to like if you are people who enjoy beer, craft beer in particular, and home brewing of beer. You are really going to enjoy it. So stay tuned for that. And I also just linked up with a couple other people, one of which is a musician who is a kind of an extended friend of the show in a way. I've never had him on, so I'm very excited about that. And also one of which is a podcast that is actually a audio drama horror podcast. So I am very excited for that one because if you guys have been following the show for a while, you know how much I love the horror audio drama genre. So very excited about that. A lot of great things happening here. I'm so very excited for you guys, especially if you are still watching and listening. You're seriously the best. So give it the old patented fist bump, boom on the video and boom on the audio. Thank you guys so much. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. We got lots more coming here on the Harder Show. 304 episodes strong, and we are not slowing down. Won't stop. Can't stop. See you guys next week. Same Harder channel, same Harder time. Take it easy, guys.